One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslik.
Hello and welcome to One Step Ahead Radio, another session, another week. As always, James Osborne is here with me today. We are happy to be back, and there are interesting things happening. And James, I know that you have tried to ski this weekend in Italy. It's apparently quite warm, and Olympics is coming. So, any reflections on that?
Yeah, good morning, Sasja. Hello and welcome, everybody. Yeah, it's been the famous long weekend that there is in Italy in early December, and it's a classic opening of the ski season. And there was like a kind of crazy situation where, we had tons of snow and cold weather, these polar vortexes that came down in late November. So everyone was rubbing their hands and thinking, oh, good, But obviously it's been, it was sunny. It's like 10, 12 degrees here down in down in the lowlands, but up in the mountains, it was barely freezing.
Wow.
So a lot of artificial snow and a lot of people, and everyone wants to be on the slopes and looking good. But we're looking forward to the Winter Olympics here, obviously in a couple of months' time, and I think they're sort of chanting for snow and doing sort of snow dances.
Trying to get as much connection with the weather gods as possible, because it's going to cost Italy a lot if they're going to power all of that with artificial snow. But I guess that's what is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something we're definitely going to keep our eye on, and not just the weather, but the whole sustainability of the Winter Olympics being right on our doorstep here is going to be a topic that's going to be close to our hearts for a while.
Probably, yes, and I completely subscribe to that. And in addition, the latest news flash from Nordics, and I'm not in Nordics for the moment, but I've been following the news, is that the Nordic region, or the Sweden in particular, is 6 degrees Celsius warmer compared to the period earlier years. So it seems that this is something that is slowly and surely spreading in our sort of a physical environment in terms of the climate change. Now, many people will most likely say weather and the climate had nothing to do with each other. So we'll see. But it seems that the climate change is making the entrance in a physical environment and shaking things around. Now, James, I know that you've been looking at something that is being shaking quite a lot, and that is related to European legislation and what's going on in that segment. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I was wanting to kick off on this because it's one of these debates that keeps going around about the simplification drive in the EU that's been the talk of the town all this year, and how many people within the sustainability profession and movement generally wring their hands and say, well, it's not right, and we're watering down, the Green Deal and everything we've fought, not just the Green Deal, many more environmental protections. And so I'm always curious to see and understand the dynamics of lobbying within the Brussels process, because I don't think people really understand that, the same companies, maybe have professionals there who wring their hands and say, we need to work on sustainability. But at the same time, behind the scenes, there's their colleagues in corporate affairs are busy lobbying to tear up as many regulations as they can, because they see, an open door with simplification written on it. So there's a Dutch NGO that came out, they're called SOMO, and they came out with leaked documents about a group of 11 multinationals really working behind within the Brussels system to tear down climate law, human rights, the CSDDD, and they set themselves up, and I thought this was best. They call themselves the competitiveness roundtable.
Wow.
And they set up and they have meetings with EU institutions, and they all dig into this narrative around, we need to boost competitiveness, which post the Draghi report is kind of sacred language in Brussels now. But behind it, they're just trying to push back as much as they can on these on EU regulations in the name of cutting costs, and that's a huge dilution and cutting back to environmental and social safeguards. So I've been seeing that very much behind the news.
There is a sort of a related analogy to this, which is coming actually from the different angle, and it's more related to the reality of how the companies that are in many cases regard themselves as the leaders in sustainability field or have their climate targets set and SBTI things approved. But when you ask them about how much are their pension investments on the pension side, which actually they manage in many ways because they manage pension savings for many of the employees, are aligned with the SBTI, they usually don't have the answer because that's not the way how they invest. So now you can imagine a situation where you have a big company that is setting the targets on the SBTI and having a carbon reduction emissions, being climate neutral 2025 or 2030 or whatever, and in the same time investing all of their pension capital completely in a different direction, just trying to maximize profit. So that gives you a bit of a sort of a sense where we are in so many of these things. I think there is a lack of consistency and lack of thinking that this is something that we cannot just walk away from. What do you think, James?
Yeah, no, it's incredible how sort of the wheels of power being driven by different parts of different organizations, in terms of pension money and lobbying affairs, and even going through national governments, sort of this very coziness between business and national governments has a very strong effect on European regulation, and also talking about rolling back the ban on on thermal powered cars in 2035, and again then it comes straight through sort of the German Chancellor and also the Italian Prime Minister with big car industries pushing hard on that. Did one so much so they're having like a field day in terms of basically redefining and rewriting the rule book in the rule book in Brussels. So I think we're seeing a lot of this, and we'll come back, I think, several other stories around this in terms of what is responsibility in terms of business and what is regulation. And the pendulum is swinging very heavily away from regulation at the moment. And, to sort of saying, well, companies, can manage these on their own, and there's the cost we have to pay for jobs and welfare and growth and the sacred competitiveness.
Yes. We've been sold another term or another narrative now. It's a competitiveness, but nobody's actually asking questions, competitiveness regarding what? Providing, short-term profits and in the same time diluting any sort of a transition that could actually save both life and health of millions of people around the world going forward. They might be rich and have money on the bank, but they still may have big difficulties to survive, which leads me to another topic, which is too hot to handle. Basically, climate change is pushing Arab region to its limits. And this is what World Meteorological Organization is reporting. And it is interesting from the money perspective, is that despite the fact that many of these countries are rich beyond belief, they still have big difficulties to cope with what is hitting them. And in relation to that, another sort of an interesting takeaway, especially on the physical side, is something that came out lately from the Central Bankers Association for Greening the Central Banks. They came out actually with the new sort of updated numbers that the physical consequences for GDP going forward by 2050 will be much more severe than anticipated earlier, which makes it even more sort of as serious because it comes from the central banks. I don't know. I mean, in terms of this too hot to handle, James, on a physical side, from Arabs to the Arab nations to central banks, do you think that there is because right now there's so much focus on artificial intelligence, and it's so much focus on what that type of business needs. It's almost that we are too blindsided to see what's going on across the world.
Well, yeah, no, it's worrying, and for the people like you and me, and maybe people listening, we've sort of seen this coming, and you wonder how long these kind of temperatures are going to be bearable. And above all the extremes, the extreme event is not just the average temperature. It's when you have these peaks of heat waves or droughts or floods, we had obviously in Southeast Asia earlier this month. So you wonder how much this is going to be. There's going to be some kind of a response to that, and also what form that response will take. Who they're going to blame for it, or who they're going to look to for solutions or ways forward. Because there's not there isn't an easy answer. There certainly isn't a quick answer to this. So I think the whole adaptation and sort of getting used to it, however much we like to, we're only at what 1.5, 1.6 average increase now. So if by mid-century this is going to be child's play, if you think of it, they're looking forward to investments and planning is going to happen in the next decade or two. This is just going to be business as usual in terms of the kind of climate we're going to have.
But this business as usual, I mean, going back to artificial intelligence, there's a big sort of a fight that is ongoing in both in the US and some other places. And in reflections on that, it's like everybody's trying to suck out the last molecule of energy for feeding these, data centers. And I was reading an article in Economist not so long ago, actually 2 weeks ago, about the fact that many of the trillions of dollars that are invested today in this further development of something we actually don't know where it's going to lead us, will be paid back maybe in the next 60 years. I mean, it's going to take time for people to get money. And everybody's just running around trying to figure out what is their angle on AI. But the energy, what about that one?
Yeah, and there's also another story this week in terms of the Financial Times was covering, a bit of a row and difference between some of these big hyperscalers like Amazon and Google, because the GHG protocol, the greenhouse, which sets kind of the accounting rules, as you were, for emissions, is trying to close down the ability of these companies and many others to compensate their green energy purchases. You say, well, okay, on one side, I'm buying dirty coal-fired power, in Texas to power my data center there, but in California, during the day, I'm running on solar power, and one kind of compensates the other. Excuse me. And now they're saying, well, you have to actually be closer in time and place to compensate like that. So how do these players and how do many other tech and big companies balance their sustainability claims with their desire to grow in AI? So I think that's going to rumble and continue to sort of play an important role there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be the continuous debate, not only debate, but also the fact that many of the energy needs going forward will be heavily dominated by the energy need for these data centers. And that will have, of course, a profound impact on ability of the industries and also nations, and I think in many cases local communities, to sort of maintain their survival mode going forward. I mean, you have this situation where you have growing data centers being built in places like Malaysia. I think right now Philippines and Malaysia are the focus in Southeast Asia, and there are other places around the world, and it's in direct conflict with some of the targets that these countries have in terms of the national development and climate goals, but also in the way how they can manage their population growth going forward, given the energy needs they will have. So James, I'm starting to get a bit more cautious about, or even I would say scared about, the fact that artificial intelligence development is so recklessly sort of supported by the financial industry in particular, without actually having a look and try to see what the checks and balances are going forward. It is a bit of a dangerous sort of a game we're playing right now.
Yeah, and I think people have really underestimated within the sustainability space kind of just what the ramifications are and the competing narratives. There's plenty of people who will say, oh, but AI will bring, benefits, and not just economic benefits, but a lot of people talk about, health benefits in terms of driving drug development and improvements on that side. I think the other thing is on the negative impact is on the local communities. I see that over 200 environmental groups in the US writing to Congress, urging them to act against energy-hungry facilities, blaming not just in terms of the environmental, the climate impact, the impact on water, but also on increasing electricity bills. in a regulation where you have, local pricing, people are seeing their electricity bills go up in the US quite dramatically at the moment. And that's feeding into people's unhappiness, seeing data centers, also use of land, people talking about that, so there's all kinds of dynamics that are starting to come to the fore, and it's just so vast. There's so much money being pumped into it that those impacts are really quite significant and very localized, as you say, to specific countries or specific regions, specific cities. So I think that's going to come out strongly as well.
I mean, even the penguins react to this. I mean, there is this
All
article.
right, I didn't see that. You have how can you connect from data centers to penguins?
I think it's a fantastic connection, and it's actually quite a tragic connection in a way. But 60,000 penguins are anticipated dead because of the lack of sardines in Antarctica. And the thing is that they are called, I mean, in the article in particular, they are called African penguins. And I just wonder if they were called American penguins, maybe they would have been saved, but they are not American, they are African. So it is it seems to me that there is it's all of these signals around the world, as it's things are sort of in our faces. We are getting these signals, but nevertheless we are not able to stop this sort of a moving train from where it goes. And the question is, do we have the right leadership? Do we have a right political leaders and business leaders to be able to do so? I don't know. I'm doubtful. I'm getting more and more doubtful for every day that passes.
Yes, I share your doubts. I'm not going to speculate on that any further. Reading a book about, I mean, it's a bit old now, but about people who switch off from the news. A growing phenomenon of people who are not informed, don't want to know, don't care, have got too many other things going on in their lives. So also a question of, in terms of information and people knowing, A, what's going on before, B, they're going to act on it. I think there's several levels to it.
Yeah, it is. And I would talk about leadership. I mean, you remember Mark Carney and, the green sort of a promise of making financial system more green and, all these things that Mark Carney has done. Now, as a prime minister in Canada, it seems to be something that you don't really think about, at least in his new role, because there is an ex-minister called Stephen Gibault, I think, which basically has come out to say to Bloomberg that the government recent policy decision puts its targets 2030, 2035, and even 2050 out of reach. Well, apparently, the new government that is led by Mark Carney is opening up for new oil and gas extraction in the parts of Canada. Had a privilege to visit Alberta area many years ago, and I have seen how many of these things look like. Nothing I would wish anybody to actually visit, because it is quite scary to visit, given what is happening on the surface of the earth. But in terms of the leadership, it seems to me that many of the so-called leaders, or what we anticipated to be leaders, are just walking out the other door when they get a position where the power and short-term interest are much bigger than this sort of as they call it, a fuzzy, which is also very interesting, a consequence of climate change. We just touched upon it. It has a physical presence here and now. So, James, any more thoughts, any more reflections for this week?
No, we've touched on so many things. It's been a real roller coaster week. Possibilities, awareness, impact, penguins, Middle East, all the way back up to the melting glaciers that I witnessed yesterday, the day before yesterday. Yeah, and AI obviously is dominating that, but I think the whole sustainability landscape is shifting as we comment on it every week.
It does, and it's a moving train, and you have to be step onto the moving train. You cannot be just a bypasser passenger on the train. And this is what we are trying to do with One Step Ahead Radio, to inform you and give you perspectives, give you a summary of what we see is happening around the world. James, many thanks for this session today. As always, a pleasure. And we will be back next week with an update just before Christmas. And stay tuned. And once again, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.